Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back in with you guys for another Gooner Talk podcast. Apologies for the little late start. I was in a rush and there's another real excuse. The traffic was bad and I'm a bit lazy sometimes. I didn't want to speed. So, you got to live your life by the rules sometimes. But it meant that we're about 8 minutes late to start off the show. But I am joined by two wonderful people to talk through what was a real disappointing day yesterday. I was at the game and it was... I can't describe the feeling of depression and how depressed I was after that game, because it was awful. The feeling of just dropping those very key points that Arsenal needed very dearly. But hopefully today's chat, and we won't talk all at Chelsea because there's a whole decade to discuss as well. So I'm joined first of all by Drew, because if there's one man that you want to cheer your day up after a decade of... How are you doing, mate?
You can't even help yourself. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good.
Yeah, well, I sound good. I'm just avoiding, as much negativity as possible, but it's quite difficult. But we're soldiering through. And obviously, one of the key things about this year, rather than this whole decade, is that the show has grown and evolved, and it's meant that we've got on some new people week in, week out. We've got the likes of French and Raf and Tomo, so plenty of new people have come on, and it's not stopping because Owen, how are you doing, mate? You good?
Not too bad, mate. Not too bad. As you said, just a little maybe depressed after yesterday's result, but I think that maybe speaks volume for the effort that we put in, and so not too bad. Yeah, this debut is going to be as memorable as Yaya Sanogo's debut.
I mean, you're in direct national competition with our other guy across the Irish Sea, being Wayne. He had some strong words. He was like, he wasn't too happy. He was like, he liked his sort of, what's the word? Is it endemic? When you're an endemic species to this podcast. And so he's going to be watching carefully, mate. So
there's a border between us, so we'll be all right. We'll be all right.
Yeah. Let's jump straight into things then and talk about yesterday. First things first, though, I have to say that going to the game, met up with Mike from the Gooners podcast, came over from Washington, and obviously saw the likes of lead judges and the gang as well. Great to see those guys, but the feeling was very, very low, and we made up for that with the amount that we drunk in the 12 pins after the game, for sure. But Drew, I'm going to start with you, mate. Just talk to me about the disappointment. About I kind of want to stick to some of the positives as well, but just to focus on sort of we let this happen to ourselves. We shot ourselves in the foot with reverting back to the mistakes that we've seen across not just this season, but in quite a lot of the last 10 years too.
I think disappointment kind of sums it up for me. Going into it, I think that people were a little bit more upbeat. I think, Arteta's gotten a couple training sessions in with the team, obviously. I thought people overall were more or less pleased with the 11 he's putting out, given the circumstances around certain positions. And that first 30 minutes, I think you could say that most of us were looking at the performance at that point and saying, if this is what we're getting already under him and he's just come in, how could it look maybe a couple months from now? I think the same positives that everyone was reflecting upon from the match prior, I think you saw additional work done there. I think we've seen some progression already, which is good. The understanding on the pitch seems a bit more crisp. I think the players are a little bit more settled into the roles that you think Arteta's going to want to put them in. You're getting improved performances from the likes of Mesut Ozil, which is incredibly important if he's going to remain at the club. So, again, that first 30 minutes was, it was a little bit revitalizing. And then traditional Arsenal comes back. So, and for me, I think that's just... I think a few things. So one, Arteta spoke about it. He's mentioned the fact that we're not as fit as we need to be. I think we could all agree there. We've been overrun by clubs that shouldn't even be, holding a candle to us in certain performances over the last 18 months. So I think that part is frustrating. I think so the mental aspect, and that's going to be his hardest challenge. And to his credit, I think that was Emery's hardest challenge. And you can say what you want about, his tenure as manager, but when you come in and there are players of varying degrees of where they're at in their careers, like you have the Aubameyangs and the Ozils, you also have, recent Nelsons of the world. but they all seem to be suffering from the same issues, and it's obviously directed towards the mental fragility that has seeped into the club. And I think we can boil that down to this. But also, credit where it's due, Chelsea switched things tactically, and we never adjusted to it. Whether that's because Arteta wants to sort of hammer in what he wants to do, and this is kind of a sacrifice you have to make, because we've seen that before. When Hasenhüttl came in at Saints, things were uplifted, but you would still see certain things would still go wrong, but he would just be adamant about sticking to what he's trying to instill as quickly as possible. So it could have easily been one of those scenarios. We really don't know. But it was a little frustrating to know that we gave ourselves the right platform to get the right performance and result, and then we sort of didn't counterbalance when things were shifted on Chelsea's end. We never really counteracted that. For me, that was a little frustrating, but I'm trying to look at it from a positive spin and think that this had to have been an intentional thing, where it's more about, obviously no one thinks we're going to qualify for Champions League this season. Some people think we might even qualify for Europa League, right? So depending on how Arteta is attacking the position, and for him, it's got to be, I have from now until the start of next season, this is my entire preseason. It's not just the summer. It's this whole rest of the season. I've got to get things the way I wanted to on a tactics board. The players have to understand where I'm coming from. We need to work on togetherness. You've seen that, and the result of where the players responded was way different than how they responded under Emery. For a result was poor. So you have to find the positives for me. But that doesn't make it any less frustrating to know that we still have the capability of shooting ourselves in both feet simultaneously. So you kind of have to take it with what it is, and our expectations as a fan base have to change over the next couple of months if we're going to give this a chance to have it actually work. And I think Arteta actually does have the tools to make it work. So
you raise a lot of key points there, especially the positive side of things, and we are going to discuss those in more detail. But there are the same mistakes, as you say, that keep cropping up game in, game out. Before I do go on to Owen's first question, every time I wear this shirt on a podcast, I get someone asking why I'm dressed as a referee. I like this shirt. It's slimming is the word. It's slimming. Vertical stripes every single time. Owen, mate, I want to talk about the defence side of things, because we can go into the goals and certain things, but the reason we lost this game is because of the second half performance. It's very clear. Why is it? In my head, I've got an obvious answer, but I'm curious as to what your thoughts are. Why is it that when we are attacked, our team's immediate sort of feeling is that they want to just run back and jockey and defend? In fact, there's a split image of when I think it's William first receives the ball, of Mustafi turning in a sprinting stance away from the player. Why is it that these players' instinct is to do that?
Well, I actually play as a centre half myself in Sunday League football. And
can we sign you? I think we should probably try and sign you.
We're not that stuck just yet. No, basically, when I see our defenders doing that, what that screams out to me immediately is an absolute lack of confidence, not only in themselves, but the players around them. Your wing back, your centre half partner there. As you say, you see that still image of Mustafi when William's driving at him. There's two men there. If you're Mustafi, you immediately have to make that decision to go and press that ball. And if all else fails, David Luiz is there behind you to cover. In terms of why we always shoot ourselves in the foot, I think Drew alluded to it. It's a mentality thing in this club, and over the past 15 years, even if you would, we've been signing. Look, even if you want to go back over to the Kroenke thing there, where they're talking about signings coming in, we have spent money. We've spent money on, whether you like him or not. Mustafi came in, a World Cup winner, 30 odd million pounds. David Luiz has come in, multiple league winning player. He played over in PSG as well. We're signing a high standard of players, but we're signing the wrong type of player. We need a dirty defender, someone who's going to command. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure if you noticed it at the stadium, but on TV yesterday, you could see it clear as day. When the huddle was taken before the match starts, it zoomed in, and it wasn't actually Aubameyang. The sort of normal thing you do when you go into a huddle is the captain will say a few words, give out some instructions, but it was actually David Luiz. And it was at that moment I says to myself, that's why we signed him. That's why we took David Luiz in from Chelsea, to have that command and centre back, to have that animated organizer at the back. But at the end of the day, it just boils down to standard of players that we have. When you look at Mustafi, there's mistakes in the lad, and do you want to know what? I I can't even be angry at him because at the end of the day, you can do nothing about the talent that you have. You know, maybe he's just reached his peak. Maybe he's not suited to the Premier League. I don't think personally that he's up to the standard. Um, but in fairness, if you look at since we're singling out Mustafi in particular here because he's probably the most prime candidate to make them mistakes we're talking about. Um, I actually think that prior to that mistake, he wasn't bad. You know, he was winning aerial duels. He was putting himself about. You could see he got the gash on the back of the head, and maybe I don't know. Only that we're so stuck for defenders, someone to bring on there. Maybe he would have been taken off as a result of that head injury, and I don't know whether he wasn't right. But look, you want to know? I don't really blame him too much at all there.
Yeah, I think Mustafi obviously is a very easy scapegoat sometimes for Arsenal, and he gets picked up on a lot because he likes to dive in. And I think there was a comment on a little bit earlier on in the chat, which I picked out. Richard Cannon said that Mustafi is the guy that always is diving in, and yet he failed to dive in at the moment that we needed him to. Drew, something that Arteta sort of we thought would take from Manchester City was this style of tactical fouls. Manchester City do it very, very well. They take yellow cards when they need to. They can identify when an attack from the opposition team is looking quite dangerous, and if they don't make that challenge, it could result in a goal. Is it a case where one of these things is simply going to take time? Because there was an element of fear, I think, when the guys were running away from the Chelsea attack, or is it actually down to the players and their mentality and just what's ingrained in them that maybe we need to replace some of these guys to get rid of sort of the fear aspect from their mentality?
I think it's a bit of both. And like, obviously, you know, like it's not too professional, but I do and have been coaching for a long time. And I've been in scenarios where you come in to a new program or a new club and you can survey the players that you have. And a lot of that has to do with breaking what came before you. It's no different than if you say you adopt a dog that was abused. You know, that dog is going to have that same behavior until you spend time with it and it can change the way it thinks, the way it reacts. And humans are no different. You know, when you're used to doing a certain thing, it becomes second nature to you. It takes time to sort of break that. But then again, also, you have to look at it from another aspect of you expect players of a certain level to be able to be more malleable in terms of they have to be able to be coached. It shouldn't take them too long to maybe break themselves with poor habits. But again, like we said, you know, it took Klopp however long to instill what he really wanted in Liverpool. You know, it took, you know, Pep a little bit long time to, depending where he was, to instill certain things with Bayern. And, you know, it was easy for him at Barca because it's already up the chain, right? So I think it's going to be a bit of both. I think we do need to get rid of certain players. We definitely do need upgrades in certain areas across the pitch, but also it's going to take Arteta time to really sort of, again, instill the things he'd like to implement at the club. And that's absolutely, you know, referring to the mental aspect of the game, not just the tactical, you know, or the physical. It's a tough job. And the good thing is he does have, because as we all know, we have a good crop of young players coming through who he'll get to work with, who've already been working with Freddie, who Arteta can pick up that mantle in a way, and they'll be more easily molded. And I think if you look across it, I think if you move forward with the business that we've routinely been linked to this summer and moving into the January window, I think the club are going to look to keep that going. You bring players in who haven't fully developed yet, who still have areas in their game where you can really tweak it, where you're not fighting against years of how a certain player has been. And it's harder to break players of that habit. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a bit of both, and that's why I think it's just going to take time. And I know you already have people. I mean, these are obviously like the very small percentage of the fan base who are more hardcore, shall we say. But people are already questioning Arteta's appointment, if you will. But I don't think these people really grasp how hard it actually is to manage, especially like at the highest level. So we're just going to have to, like I said before, we're going to have to change the way we're looking at the season, how we have to survey it. I think, you know, we can have a better base of what we know we're working with come the summer, and then hopefully we keep seeing little semblances of progression, because even I would say that if come May we don't see any improvement from the little things that we were just talking about, like how defenders stand off far too much, they don't know the balance between when to stand off and when to step, when to check to your man, when not to. If we're not seeing changes in that by May, then you can maybe be a little bit worried. But if you're not seeing changes after 180 minutes of football under a new manager, then, you know, that's a little bit too much for me in terms of being overly critical. So you got to find that balance.
I think that I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted because a couple of my mates are in the chat discussing my shirt, as you know, as how it is. When we talk about the period of time, though, Drew, like it's going to take a lot longer than how I feel the fans are going to give him time, if you know what I mean. It's going to take a lot of time for this to change, and I just don't see, because even before this process has even started, people have written Arteta off. And Owen, you look like you're on the edge of your seat to say something about this. Go for it.
Let him just go ham. Go on.
It's just I can't comprehend how somebody can watch Arteta's first 2 games and not be impressed. More so going back to the Bournemouth game here, it was the tactical changes within one game that I was massively impressed by. And it was when we were going, we did it last, so I think it was obviously the level of opponents we were facing in Chelsea. It's a much harder task. But with Bournemouth, when we were in transition, we were moving into a shape of a 3-2-4-1, which is sort of City-style change in shape, with Maitland-Niles coming in as an inverted wing-back, Saka pushing into that 4, and Granit Xhaka dropping back into the left side of that 3. And I just look and I think if Guardiola comes into a club in his first match, or Mourinho comes in to a club in his first match, and you see that change in shape, you see the and let me make this clear, coordinated pressing. What you saw against City was manic pressing, but what you saw against Bournemouth and Chelsea was coordinated pressing. And it's the organisation there. And as I said, Mourinho was coming to Spurs, and you heard Gary Neville creaming his pants over the fact that he had Sanchez. They had changed the shape into a 3-4-3, and they were calling this a tactical masterclass. But after that game, I heard no praise of Arteta in terms of the changing of the shape. So I just think it's crazy to not be impressed by the impact that this guy has made. And let's remember, with an average group of players, this team is nothing special in my opinion. We're also dealing with a lot of injuries. We don't even have a lot of our first team players available for selection. So I think that if you're not impressed, you don't know football.
It's so frustrating seeing the negativity, especially when you can, as you say, see clear differences, clear improvements in the way that we're playing. You saw in the first 35 minutes or so of that game an Arsenal that could attack well, that was fluid, that was dynamic, that actually had players like Maitland-Niles improving, Nelson improving. Like, there's a lot of criticism for Nelson at Bournemouth, but I thought he had a really, really decent game against Chelsea. Ainsley Maitland-Niles is someone who's got a huge criticism, and yet the statistics of his game rivaled some of the best right backs in the league during that game. And it's a shame that we're in a climate now where people can get set upon extremely quickly, and then those opinions are very, very hard to shift. We've seen that with Ozil and with Mustafi and with Xhaka. Now, there are certain times when criticism is deserving and that criticism should be rightly given out. But the issue is that we get very attached, and players get branded with these opinions and these criticisms and the descriptions that they get, and that becomes hard to change. So if that's going to happen with Arteta, it's going to be really hard to try and turn things around. I should say, to play devil's advocate to this, that being in the ground yesterday, the time during the game where Arsenal were ahead, so the first 80 minutes or so, the crowd were brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. It was nice to be in a stadium where it was loud, it was vocal, there was people singing. I'm sure you could hear it on the TV as well. But being in the ground, we were, as a crowd, especially in the North Bank, we were so vocal, so loud, and it was really great to see.
Can I play devil's advocate with you there as well? See that because trust me, look, I've been watching videos and stuff, and player ratings, fan ratings, this, and every set a solid 10. And look, as much as I love being an Arsenal fan, and I love get on with most Arsenal fans, we're a difficult bunch at the best of times, but we sort of stick together. But one thing that I was massively disappointed, and I'm not sure because it's because of my circumstances, was between the 80 and the 85th minute, we were a goal behind and the crowd emptied. The crowd started coming out. You could see empty seats starting to appear within the crowd. I mean, this is our manager's home debut. We're one goal behind. The team have worked their socks off for 80 minutes. And look, as you said there, these are new tactics, new things. It's going to take time. I would allude it to when you're a kid learning how to tie your shoelaces. It's a lot of fat fingers and tongue sticking out, concentrating on how to do it. So much effort. But look, you keep doing it, you keep doing it, you keep doing it, and eventually it's second nature. You don't expend as much energy. So that's just going to come with time. We can't expect it to click immediately. So for me, watching them seats empty so early on was massively disappointing in terms of the fact that I find it difficult getting to games financially, finding the time with running a house or relationship. It costs a lot of money to travel over to an Arsenal game. You're talking maybe 60, 70 pounds for flights, your ticket, another £100 for a hotel, your transportation to the airport, from the airport to your hotel. It's a lot of money to go. So when I sit there and look at people walking out of the games, I'm just thinking that there's people, hundreds of thousands of fans all around the world that would relish the opportunity to go to them games. It's 10 minutes, 10 minutes. Just sit there, support the team, get behind them.
No, and people were leaving for half time, like when we were 1-0 up against Chelsea in Arteta's first home game. It's really frustrating, and I've said my piece on people leaving so many times on the show, and ultimately things aren't going to change. It's like I always compare it to the argument of global warming. Like, people aren't going to change their ways. People aren't going to use public transport more, walk more, like, even though they should do. But it's you just have to keep trying to press it home, and eventually maybe something will change. But with this, like, I just don't see the toxicity, which is a word which I don't really like using because it gets used across social media these days so often, but it is, and it becomes a very, very toxic place. Now, I don't think that toxicity can be or the blame for that can be left at anyone's personally. I think that if you're going to blame anything, it is because of the growth of social media and how easy it is to voice an opinion, how easy it is to get your views and the negativity and the positivity as well. It's fair to say for both of them out there. And that now people have got so much more of a wider global coverage that those opinions can be said much, much easier. I want to bring it back to the football, though, and talk about the positives that we saw on the pitch. We've mentioned our right-hand side, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, and with Nelson. But Drew, I want to talk about specifically Lucas Torreira playing in the deepest part of that midfield, a position where he's been starved of that under the latest under Unai Emery. Do you think that this continue and hopefully this long-term plan to play him there will encourage him maybe to stick around? Because we've heard so many rumours of him wanting to go off, and maybe that his other half's unsettled in England and he prefers to be in Italy. Do you think him playing in his more natural position is going to convince the Uruguayan to stay?
Well, I think it's going to help. Players want to play where they're best at, and I think that's universally understood. We've seen it before, and we've talked about it multiple times on the show, have we not? How effective he was for Sampdoria, the performances he put in for Uruguay in 2018, as the deepest, in that role, and we've never really seen it at Arsenal since he's come here. So, I do think that. Within what has been 18 months of him relatively being used in a manner of which he's not best suited can be frustrating for a footballer or for any professional athlete, no matter what the sport is. I don't think it's just going to be about where he plays. I think a lot comes into it how we play as a club. Certain players want to play a certain type of football. They want to have a certain connection and understanding with their manager. I think all of these things will factor in. And as we've seen so far, it looks like the vast majority of the squad, if not the whole squad, are completely behind the appointment from what we know of. I thought Torreira has been, in his two performances since, I thought he's been better. You look at his, the way he helped control the flow, I thought was quite good. I think he had the second best passing percentage amongst the team other than Callum Chambers, and they automatically, it's what you want to see. Chambers can get the ball, play it out of the back to Torreira, who can then spray it to Mesut Ozil. You can release Nelson down that way, and he's used to doing that. And in that role, when he was at Samp, he was always that connector between midfield and the center back. So that's what you kind of want to see. But I don't know if that's the only factor, right? If his significant other isn't happy, then he'll have to factor that in if his home life supports him. And I think that we've seen time and time again, players just won't settle in the country, or their family just won't settle, and it does play a role. We've heard many times that Mustafa Sami would be happier in Italy, and he hasn't left yet, but it is a thing. So I hope he stays. I think you do have to wonder how Arteta views him in the long term. Like we've heard the sound bites and we've seen the reports about how Arteta says that, he has a place here, but you have to wonder if Arteta is going to be more of like the Pep and he wants someone with maybe a bit bigger of a frame. I think Torreira as a player, from what he can bring into a team, I think it's what we need. But he also might want someone with that same package, just maybe a bit more physically imposing. Maybe a little bit taller, a little bit quicker, perhaps, can really impose himself on the match from that angle. And Torreira, does struggle in that regard. So we'll have to see. I mean, if he does stay, I'll back him completely because I was happy with the signing when it happened, and I think he still has something to offer. It's just a matter of if we can get all the boxes ticked.
So final sort of thoughts then on Chelsea for me. It's hugely gutting. I said weeks ago that this season in terms of Premier League is done. It's a write-off. I mean, just avoiding relegation seems like getting it. Let's get 40 points, guys. Come on. That's what we want to get to at the moment. That's how it feels. I mean, I was talking to someone on the way back, and actually, I was walking back to the public house on the way back from the game, and I believe his name's Chris Hudson. I believe that he was in front of me, and he was having a conversation with the person next to him, and he was talking about how if you actually look at the games we've got remaining, you realistically need another 7 wins or so to get to 6th to achieve Europa League football again. And you're looking at these games, you're thinking, I can't see us winning 1 game, let alone 7. So, I mean, that pretty much rounds off thoughts on where we think this could go ahead. We've got the United game coming up. I want to talk about that towards the end of the show, towards our predictions. But there is a couple of things that are also coming up, and that is, one, the transfer window. And secondly, looking back upon this decade, which is an important thing to do. I saw someone in the chat put the decade ends in 2020, which I can't understand because the decade starts during that year. Come on, that makes no sense. Don't get my OCD all like that. But in terms of looking ahead then and looking to the January transfer window, Drew, we talked about Torreira, but Owen, what Drew said there about having someone big and imposing next to Torreira to help him out, it looks like we're going to lose our imposing, if you want to call him imposing. I know some people wouldn't. Granit Xhaka looks like he's going to be gone. He was supposedly not in the squad because he was ill. I don't really buy that. So I think that's a classic smokescreen of an excuse of why a player's not in the squad. A classic Mesut Ozil excuse. It was back in the day, being ill. I think we can be pretty sure that Xhaka is going to be gone this January transfer window. We'll come on to who else might be also gone this window. But do you actually see Arsenal going out? I can see in the chat at the moment, Daniel Roberts put that he wants Rabiot as a person that could come in. Marston says Rabiot and Demiral would be a good piece of business in January. What's your feeling towards how Arsenal might approach this window and the positions that could get tackled by, obviously, Raul and Edu?
Mm-hmm. So, if you want to take a positive from the weekend, the one thing that I do think is that it emphasises our need for a centre half.
We do that all the time, though. We do this, don't we? We lost during the transfer window, and so suddenly, we'll sign someone.
Rinse, repeat. Yeah. No. Well, look. The only thing I would say is within the last few days, online through various sort of news outlets, we've been seeing us being linked with some high quality defenders for once, and not just sort of some obscure name that nobody's ever heard of. We're hearing Upamecano and Koulibaly being mentioned. Now, we've been linked with Upamecano for about 3 transfer windows now. So for me, there's no smoke without fire. The rumor was that we put in a bid of 55 million during the summer and it was rejected. But apparently it's coming out now that they're more than willing to let him go. So I think that could be a doable one. Koulibaly maybe less so. And I think the major thing that makes me think that is that City's position at the minute. Man City find themselves without Vincent Kompany. Laporte is out injured, and Otamendi's Otamendi, really, isn't he? So I think that you could see City or Liverpool target Koulibaly. So I'm not sure about that. And
I think Liverpool are going for Diego Carlos of Sevilla. Actually, interestingly, apparently it's £64 million in for him, which is an interesting one.
The frustrating thing here is, look, we heard Josh Kroenke come out now in the summer and say get excited, and look, while I was as excited as anybody about Nicola Pepe arriving in the summer, you look back now and you think, was it smart business? So, but look, it turned out that the actual net spend in terms of the money they actually put out during the summer wasn't actually that substantial. So I think that that could line us up, especially with a new manager coming in, to spend a bit bigger, sort of some more investment in the summer. And surely Arteta had some plan in place, to guarantee him a budget for January, because I'm sure looking on the City bench a couple of weeks ago, he recognised the problems.
I've just seen a really, really interesting statement from Ben Parfitt saying that he reckons we should go for Otamendi. He worked in Spain with Mustafi, didn't he? So he might be a good one to get for. But no, I think, Owen, that like those players, Upamecano and Koulibaly, we obviously did the tactical breakdown interview with Rich Hall from Football Italia talking about Koulibaly, and there's reasons why this link has got a very small element of realism because of the situation that Napoli are in, because they want a couple of our players in Torreira and Kolasinac, that could help Arsenal muscle into the deal. But if I'm being realistic, I can't see us going out and spending the money that would be required to take the centre-back services away from Napoli. And if anything, I mean, in the chat box, I did see an interesting comment saying that we would go for, is it Gabriel of Lille? It says Archie said that it will be Gabriel from Lille. Let's be real. It is most likely that Arsenal would go probably for that second tier, third tier player that's got more potential. Raul Sanelli's come out and said that he's not the biggest fan anyway of the January transfer window. It's more for emergency situations. But I mean, Drew, arguably you could say that Arsenal are in an emergency situation right now. So where's your head at with this window? Because it's going to it's one of the most intriguing windows that we've had, I feel.
Oh, man. I wouldn't be terribly disappointed if we didn't do any business, especially for, bringing in someone like a center back in January is difficult. It takes defenders. Even
if like Xhaka goes and we did nothing, you wouldn't be.
No, I think you could try to replace Granit Xhaka, and I think you should. Just
Kallstrom.
I don't want to. We're not supposed to relive the decade. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think if he goes, then you can only really bring in someone who you really feel there's a high percentage chance that they're going to settle. The last thing you want is an unsettled player coming in January and remaining unsettled for the next 3 months. So it's tricky. I mean, Wenger said himself that he also didn't really like the January window either. I think managers actually don't like it for a reason. You can absolutely cause disturbance in the balance that you've already established amongst the squad if you don't really do the right business. So I think if we had a bigger injury issue, I would really be all for it. And if we do have that big of a need to, say, bring in a center back, in worst case scenario, we can always just recall Saliba early from his loan if we really wanted to, apparently. So that could be the fallback. I do think, though, we're not going to get a better idea of the kinds of signings we should be bringing in under Arteta until he's had long enough to really survey the squad, see what he has to work with, see who's really adapting to what he needs and what he wants or not. And then when we know that for a fact, in the summer we handle our business then. I think that just makes no sense. And also, again, with the factor in, clubs don't also like selling players in January unless they can really live without them. Again, everyone's saying we should get Upamecano in January, but Konaté is still injured. And RB Leipzig are in serious contention to actually win the Bundesliga this year. They can give away their best center back in January. Like, be serious. So these other things you have to factor in. So I would replace, maybe if Xhaka leaves, I'd replace him. But I think if that's the only business we do, I'd be fine with that. And if we didn't do it, I would still be fine with it because I think there are other players who can take this opportunity to really try to prove that they maybe deserve more time. So
any realistic names from Germany? Xhaka.
I'm not quite sure. It's difficult. The level of player that a fan base is going to want are from clubs who can we really pull them away? However, Julian Weigl is supposedly going to PSG. That's a player we should have been going after, 100%. And the fact that we didn't is slightly frustrating to me. But no, you can look at someone. There's decent players at the likes of Werder Bremen at Bayer Leverkusen that you can look into that we are a massive step up from those clubs. that we can maybe go after and steal a punt, but I'd have to think more about it. You didn't prepare for me, Tom, or I didn't prepare for you.
Trust me, you wait till we get to the decade questions. I ain't prepping you for any of those. It's going to be off the top of your head. But no, there are some really. And the thing is, you look at some players like. People looked at Pablo Fornals from Villarreal last season, obviously signed for West Ham, and so many people, including myself, really thought this guy would be someone that could come to the Prem and do a decent job. Right. But and I know that being at West Ham changes things. I'm aware of that, but it hasn't really worked out. And you can't just suddenly assume just because someone's had a decent season, we should be coming in. Like the links to Rabiot, and I see people in the chat box being genuinely quite realistic about it, is that I don't think that Rabiot would come in and change our fortunes. I don't think he's the type of guy, the type of character that we need. He's not. Yep. He's too volatile for me. He's got too many issues. He had it at PSG. He's not the committed type of player that I'd like in this Arsenal side. I want someone that knows what Arsenal is about. And to be honest, I don't think you're really going to get that from the type of player that a lot of people want, the big, high-end players. I don't think you're going to get that. We've seen the likes of Aubameyang come in, and we're going to come on to in a second. And now he's looking like he wants to go. I want someone who's going to come in, build his quality up, be thankful to Arsenal for coaching him, and get attached to this squad. Go on, Owen.
Would you take Lewis Dunk?
Yes, I would. Yeah. And I think this is a classic thing of Arsenal fans being arrogant, because I always bring up the example of Johnny Evans. Is that Johnny Evans could have been signed for around 10 million a couple of years back, and when that link was made, the utter vitriol on Twitter that link was horrific. And you look at him now, even Soyuncu, I think he went for 7 million from Freiburg. I mean, what a miss that was. It's utterly ridiculous sometimes that we look, and even when we were talking about Gabriel at Lille, right? A lot of people said that, we're going to end up with him, but he could end up being really good. Like there is the fact is that even I can do as many tactical breakdowns, as many statistical analysis. I can do all of this, but at the end of the day, you don't know how good someone is going to be until they arrive, and you just hope and pray to God that whoever does come in gets the backing from the fans.
Yeah, there's been a snobbery around us for probably quite a while, and one person I know this is going to sound insane, but one person I would like to even maybe buy in with a slight chance of getting him on the cheap is Dejan Lovren. It's another defender with a mistake in him, but in terms of someone that you will get in January, Liverpool would maybe be willing to offload him, and at a cut price deal. You know, as it's. Look, not the long-term solution in any case, but a stopgap. I tell you, another one that we turned our noses up, and I think we missed the boat on this one, was rather than David Luiz, I thought we should have been in for Gary Cahill. I think he fits that mold of a commanding centre back. Yeah, he has. You know, I'm not sure why so many people turn their nose. Yes, he's not the most lightning quick defender, but he's a defender's defender.
Sometimes it's that people like the exotic option, like a British homegrown talent. Sometimes just isn't not homegrown talent necessarily, but a homegrown 28, 29, 30-year-old player isn't fashionable. It just isn't.
But if you look at name the iconic defenses from the Premier League from the league over the last 20 years. They always have a British centre half in that defence. Always.
With John Terry, Ferdinand. I mean, you're looking at these guys, and yes, they were backed up. I mean, you look at Vidic and how good he was for Manchester United, and even David Luiz during the time where he won titles at Chelsea was a different player to maybe the one that we see now, but. At the end of the day, we need to be more realistic. We need to just be looking to bring in players that are going to do an important job, that know their stuff, have experience, but also looking to the younger side of things. We've done it sometimes with Martinelli, to a lesser extent with Guendouzi. The issue is, by buying those players, there's not enough experience and quality ahead of them to give them the time to bed in. Guendouzi has had a lot of pressure put on him, and that's why we've seen a decline. The same happened with Alex Iwobi. He wasn't allowed that development process, and he was thrust into the limelight very often, and that led to a bit of a downfall.
In terms of like we were saying, that sort of old school sort of British centre half, or even players like that throughout the squad, I think that actually benefits the young lads in the squad, because during the Chelsea game, one thing that massively frustrated me was Guendouzi throughout the whole game, from the first minute the theatrics were on, full flow. Straight away, a free kick was given, and he was moaning to the ref while he should have been getting back into position. And I think it was Leno actually pulled him back in. If you look at the Chelsea second goal, Guendouzi half-heartedly went into an aerial challenge with Hudson-Odoi, and whilst running back, he threw the arms in the air, and I was sitting on, fuck me, mate, get back, get back. And what you need is, what I didn't see was after that, was somebody grab him by the scruff of the neck and say, cop yourself on here, mate, switch on. And I just think that's something we massively lack within our squad.
Yeah. We're talking about players that get the scapegoat a little bit earlier on in the show, and Bulgarian Gooner says they're nobody going to mention that Luiz being immense since Arteta came in, and he has improved a lot. And I don't necessarily think it's improvement. I just think it's the system and the coaching that maybe he's getting under Arteta is. And I mean, there's great comments to hear from Luiz saying that he is genuinely one of the best coaches, and he expects him to be one of the best in the future. And that's really, really positive to hear. We did have a donation. Thank you very much. As always, the ever-present Julian Nagelsmann says, I'm back from KO 100% or any manager, but I fear for our future with KSE, with their lack of involvement, poor recruitment, and lack of backing the manager. And that is the key thing, is that Arteta does need to be financially backed in these windows to do the rebuilding process that is needed. And I'm just not sure he's going to get as much as he needs, because you look at the likes of Wolves and how much they end up spending. You look at other lesser teams in the Premier League that spend a hell of a lot of money, like Everton, how much they've spent, that gradually they will get it right. And we just don't seem to spend as much. We always need to just draw even. And you saw that, as you said, Owen, with how the Pepe deal was structured, that in the net spend of the season, we didn't really spend a whole lot of money. And that does need to change. There does need to be more investment coming. There does need to be more spending, and spending in the right way, because you can't say that Arsenal haven't spent, because we have, but spending in the right way and on the right players for the right system, for the philosophy that Arteta wants to deploy, is what's going to be key. Drew, I want to get your thoughts on another outgoing player. Pierre has apparently his agent has made it known to the club that he wants to leave in January.
Yep.
First of all, how much credence do you have to this? And second of all, how bothered are you by this?
I'm not bothered by it.
But genuinely, I'm not.
Can we end the discussion there? Do I have to bang on further with this? Damn it. It wouldn't necessarily surprise me. Again, look, not for nothing, he's come in and he has a goal-scoring pedigree that is incredibly impressive, and no one can really speak against that. And a lot of our fan base took the piss at Dortmund fans who were warning us about everything else, and I was one of them. But with him, he's very much a player who he's happy as long as the wind's blowing in his direction. As soon as things go sour in any amount of way, he will start, putting dissension in the camp. And that's why I was so angry when he was named captain, because he is the last person in that squad that should be trying to lead this team right now. And you see it. He's one of the first people to down tools when things go awry on the pitch as well. The effort levels just deplete by 90%. So, and not for nothing, like when you have a manager like Arteta, who you presume wants to play expansive football, who wants to be, he wants more technical quality across the side, wants to be more creative, better combination play, asking more of a center forward. It's kind of like you see how Aguero will routinely roam from the center channel. He'll always drop back deep. He'll be involved. You don't get that with Oba. You just don't. And I know he's struggling right now, and a lot of fans are frustrated, but you get that more from Lacazette in that role. So for me, I wouldn't be shocked if Arteta was looking at the squad and saying Lacazette just has more of the qualities you want. He's more balanced, well-rounded center forward than Oba is, and for all his goals, and they've bailed us out in certain occasions, and you can't really speak against that. But for all his goals, he is a player who, for me, is and has always been unlimited in a lot of different ways. And I just don't see, like, again, he scores under the best circumstances. Sometimes he does make something out of nothing, but as football keeps evolving tactically, you need players that can contribute more. You can't just have players who only become involved in passages of play when it's within 25 yards of goal. That's, for me, I don't think that's a player that Arteta would even want, given the work that he's done with just the players you've seen at City. And you can look at even Raheem Sterling was a very limited player. He had good pace. He was good on the ball. at Liverpool, but he was not nearly the player that he was now. And you see that development. You see how more involved he is in every phase of play, even in the defensive third. And you have to look at it and say, well, if that's how Arteta wants to operate, then we have to be okay with Oba maybe leaving. And not for nothing, that gives us then money to put back into the squad for that rebuilding project we're all discussing, because we don't know how much money we're going to be allowed to spend in the summer. It might be one of those scenarios again where we have to sell to buy. And honestly, if that's the position we're in, that's the position we're in. But there's no reason why you can't come out on a positive with that regard. It's about buying for your need, not buying for the profile of the player. And when you do that, you can find quality that fits what you want at reasonable prices rather than spending upcharges because the player is of a perceived level and gravitas, if you will. So I wouldn't be sad about it. I know the fan base would probably explode if we sold him. The only caveat for me is if he was to leave, just don't sell him to a Premier League rival. That's it. That's the only caveat I would have. Just make sure he can head off to Spain. The thing is, where's he going to go? Real Madrid doesn't need a center forward. Barca doesn't need a center forward. Where's he going to go back to in Germany? He can't. He might go to Italy, maybe. He did start there. He was at Milan before he went to ASC.
I genuinely think Real would still be tempted. I know
you think so?
Saying. Yeah, I think they would, because they've always lacked that key striker. But the thing with Benzema is a fantastic centre forward, but
right.
not a great striker. He's fantastic at being the enabler. And actually, since Ronaldo left, I think you've seen Ronaldo struggle at Juventus a lot because he hasn't had the Benzema with him. He hasn't had that. It's not a system that's geared to get the best from Ronaldo. And with Aubameyang coming in, is that they would once again get that player that Benzema could play as a second striker to, or Aubameyang could even play wide right. But it would be a lot of money to spend on someone you're going to waste playing out wide. But at the same time that I think they would go for it, because they know that Benzema won't work forever as that player. And I think that they know that they need to please the fans as well with another Galactico signing. They brought in Hazard, but the seasons before that, they never really had that. And the fans, at the Bernabeu get very on the manager and the president. And I think that for 2 or 3 seasons, Aubameyang, if he was signed, would do a job. Now, it's interesting to see some of the links linking Jovic with a return, not return, rather, but with going the other way, effectively. Sabas being possibly involved as well. That intrigues me, because I think that a lot of people would look at what he's done at Real Madrid and think this isn't really someone that we could be targeting. But from what I've saw of him at Frankfurt,
Jovic, I would take him in a second. It's not even a question.
He's a fantastic player, and he's got a hell of a lot of potential. But I don't really want to get bogged down on that, because we've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to throw out the quick fire questions of the decade, is what we're going to call them. So in the chat box, get ready, because we're going to read through plenty of your comments to do with these. And the guys are going to have to think on their feet as well. I've written down some questions. I might come up with some more depending on the time, but we're going to go through as many of these as possible. Owen, you've got the tough job, mate, because you're going to go first on this one. But it is one that you could pretty much predict was going to get asked. What has been your best moment of the 2010 to 2019 era?
Ooh, Tuffy. There's a few. Aaron Ramsey's goal against Hull, FA Cup final. Yeah. That was probably, I sprained my ankle celebrating that goal.
How do you manage that?
I fucking jumped off a bar stool, slipped on some beer. So yeah, but bad injury that ended my football career. That's why.
I think that I was still at university when that goal went in, and it was an amazing moment and
a sentimental moment. Thierry Henry's goal against Leeds, but it's just
God, that was still that seems like an age ago, doesn't it? But wow, yes, definitely so. Drew,
let's hear it. My favorite. It's tricky. I might not pick what people think. I really enjoyed some of our individual one-off performances that we've seen. I particularly like how well we played against Barcelona, where Jack Wilshere went up against arguably the best midfield trio of that era and was absolutely brilliant that night. So for me, I would say that because you looked at it and you think that even though it wasn't a team like the Invincibles or even from 1998, it was still we could go up against the best and really really put a shift in, and it made you think that there could have been so much more from the club at that moment, that we were at the precipice of there's two directions that we could have taken, and unfortunately went in the wrong way. But for me, I just thought, like, for just being that excited, I miss that kind of feeling. I think everybody else does as well. So yeah, for me, that'd probably be a big one. Side note, I loved Robert Van Persie when he was at the club as well. And it's unfortunate how circumstances that he left, but I thought some of the goals he scored for us were absolutely brilliant. So that'd probably be a little caveat. Robin Van Persie, I loved him at the club. I absolutely loved him at the club. He was brilliant. And then, we don't have to go through what happened, but
yeah,
yeah, that'd be a down moment on a decade. But yeah,
but yeah, no, I think that some of those guys, I think it's the one against Everton where it hits it on the volley and it just curves and hits the post. My God, that was a great goal.
Yep.
Bulgarian Gooner says the 2014 FA Cup win. Danny from Burkett Wonderland says when Wenger got fired.
Christ.
Daniel Robert says winning the FA Cup against Chelsea. That was a great one. Another Ramsey goal to win that for us. Obviously, then went going down to I think it was Victor Moses. Was it that got sent off in that game for? Was it diving? Did he get sent off for diving? I think from my memory.
Second yellow, wasn't it?
Yeah, second yellow. Archer says Wenger's last speech had him in tears. There's some really Stoke getting relegated was another one from Danny. Just in there. There's plenty in there. There's a couple for me. In terms of a moment, when Danny Welbeck scored the winner against Leicester at home in the season that Leicester won it, that's the closest I felt that we've come to thinking actually we could challenge for the title for once. That goal was huge. The FA Cup win against Chelsea is still such a huge one for me as well. Just personally having a lot of friends who are Chelsea fans, and in that moment as well was great. I mean, making the actual signing of Mesut Ozil as well. Like before you think about what Mesut Ozil has been, just in that moment, thinking that this club is turning a corner, they're signing a marquee player. I remember the buzz on transfer deadline day, watching it on Sky Sports, the amount of people crowding around. I think it's Geraint Hughes, the Sky Sports presenter, when he was at the ground. That moment was huge. So going from that positivity to Drew, going to you first. I can't be unfair when I know we're making him start everyone. But your worst moment of the decade?
Probably also ironically enough, maybe that actually was that before? I always forget, but it's tough. I do think maybe just seeing some of the players that we had at the club and just the circumstances that they left in, I thought that was a little bit frustrating. And I think at that point, a lot of us maybe started to understand that it may start to get a little bit different than what we were used to. We had Robin Van Persie at the club. Seth was still here. Nasri when he was younger was a hell of a player as well. The fact seeing Lucas Podolski not be the player that I hoped he would turn out to be for us and revitalize, because I absolutely love Podolski as well.
Yeah.
I think moments like that, it's just because again, we at that moment in time we had so much potential. And I think that it's, for me, I guess to sum it up, the most frustrating part of the decade would be to see the fucking decline, like in the manner of which where we once were, and then now. It's not like we're in dire straits, but I mean, and it's been alluded to before in the show that there is some air of a little bit of spoiledness amongst our fan base, but you can't really blame us so much because we know what the club was capable of, the level the club was at, the level the club could have gone to, and then for it to go the opposite direction, I think it's frustrating. So for me, that's probably the overall disappointing thing about the decade, is just to see where we were a little bit before that, and then how things were just so frustrating year on year seemingly, and you just want to reprieve at some point. So yeah.
Owen.
Jesus, there's a few. This is a big list.
A lot of people in the chat have said the 8-2 at Old Trafford was the lowest they've felt.
The cup against Birmingham, that was bad.
Yeah.
No, it was horrible. but in terms of a moment, actually feeling was the 8-2 against United. I was actually sat in a bar with friends, and it turned out to be a United supporters bar. and I was the only Arsenal fan in the whole place, and it was horrible. A nightmare. And I actually, do you want to know what? In terms of, we've talked a lot on the podcast tonight about mentality of the club, and I actually think that was a pivotal point in the drop in mentality within this club. I think it's when I think that's when we went from a super club to a top 4 club. Even though we had been declining, I think that was massive and knocking the confidence out of the whole squad and the club, and the culture around the club in general.
Yeah, I mean, the way the club has changed as well. I mean, Sonny brought it up the moment that Stan Kroenke got complete ownership. I think that was a moment because it took away a lot of people's identity because of their shares, and that had been their families for generations, and that just detachment was huge. Richard Cannon brings up a big one for me, just the way that Cazorla left, like with the awful injury that he had, that he was never able. I mean, it's so fantastic to see him playing so well, getting in the Spain squad again for Villarreal. It's painful because I wish he was doing it at Arsenal, and I feel like we actually desperately need a player in the centre of midfield like him that's going to drive the ball forward, take players on, create chances, score amazing free kicks like in that final. So to lose him was huge. Archie brought up the 10-2 aggregate score against Bayern Munich. That was pretty awful. I'm sure it is this decade, but Van Persie's sending off in the new camp for when he got that second yellow for kicking the ball. Is that is that this decade?
Yeah, pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure it is. It must be. It must be this decade, surely. But that for me was just the biggest moment of Champions League, thinking that we could get a result, because it just took away our outlet, and then they were just able to just pile on to us, and we were still at that point going through. And it's 2012 apparently in the chat box. So that was a tough one to really take for me. But yeah, the Europa League final last season was pretty horrific as well. I mean, think if we'd have won that back in the Champions League, things might be so different. Atletico Madrid the year before in the semi-final was pretty bad. There's a few, it's fair to say. There's a few to talk about. Owen, best of or favourite signing that we made this decade?
Oh, that's too, isn't it? In hindsight now, I hate him. But when we signed Alexis Sanchez, that just sparked absolute excitement. Sort of, as you said, it wasn't too long after signing Ozil. What was it? Was it a year later? 2 years later? But as you say, I thought we were going for that sort of higher standard of signings again, and everyone was thinking we've got our Arsenal back, but the little snake turned out to show his true colours.
Yes, Alexis, for me, he's probably the player of the decade. For me, for what he did, how he changed the way that we played on the wings as well, just with that style and the commitment and what he showed. Cazorla, again, just for me, is one of my favourite players. Drew Podolski, is that coming up for you as a favourite signing?
It's up there, but
it's
Mesut Ozil, because I've been watching Mesut Ozil since he was at Schalke before he went to Werder Bremen, and to see where he went in his career and to see how well he performed for Real Madrid, and to think that we actually ended up with him at, regardless of the circumstances of how he left, a player of his quality, and then also in tandem with Alexis Sanchez coming in, two players who were at the highest level, arguably the two biggest clubs in the world, bar United, are now playing for Arsenal. That was massive for all of us. And it's unfortunate that didn't really work out with either player. And I think both of them showed those little glimpses. You had Ozil's season where he almost broke the assist record, and that will pain me that he never actually did. Sanchez, the way he played, up until the point where the season where he left. Again, another what-if moment in a way. But as you say, so for me, that for me is just my favorite signing, because I love him as a player, and I love the positivity that the fan base actually finally had again. Everyone wanted to be reinvigorated by something like that, but
I'm not going to do worse signing because I think it's just
you could pick 50 of them.
Man, it's horrific. I mean, there's lots of good suggestions for worse signing, as ironic. Best signings I can see that are coming through in the chat box. Sanogo being a good one. Andre Santos coming up. I personally love the signing that we made to replace Patrick Vieira. Oh wait, it's been 15 years and we've still not done it. So there is that. Two more to go. Drew, most important thing that happened. It can be good, it can be bad, but what is the most defining moment of this? Not your favorite, but for the club, what is the most defining thing?
When Arsene Wenger left. I mean, it has to be, because that's such a paradigm shift for the club, where you have someone who helped elevate the club to the level of where you could say without question that we were one of the biggest clubs in Europe. Regularly, and the level of players that we were bringing in under Wenger, Dennis Bergkamp was here, Mark Overmars, even dating back to that point, and you saw the players that routinely came through the door, and it was just fun. We were fun to watch, in our pomp, and so I think that it was always going to be a monumental task to figure out what to do when he left. Same with United with Fergie. They have not been the same since, and you could easily say, in Wenger's decline, to Fergie's credit, he retired when he knew he should have retired. He didn't bang on for another couple of years because he wanted to hold on for whatever reason. He knew he was finished, so that was it. But with us, with Wenger, the circumstances of how he left was difficult, and then the circumstances of how we're going to move forward after him have been equally, if not worse. So I think for us, I think it's a club-defining period. And for that, I mean, it could be both good and bad. You could easily go either way. So that's what's almost exciting about it in a way. So,
Owen?
I would probably say the same, but I'm not, because this is boring and he's a much better talker than I am. So, I would say the cup wins were massive. Breaking that Ducks back, the sort of negativity around the club for years with that, and especially after we said that Birmingham lost. I hate even saying that. So to get them cups was important. I actually, what I'll mention is the last contract extension that Wenger was given. I think I think it was quite defining, because I think what the club did was they held on to a man who had too much love to let go, and they're partially responsible for destroying his reputations with some fans. I think that if he had left after maybe that the first FA Cup win, if not that, definitely the second, there would be a lot less animosity towards him as an individual. So
for sure. Mine, there's two. I think that obviously the Wenger thing is huge, but I think actually what came after that, mistakenly appointing Unai Emery, thinking that he was the person to take the club past Wenger, I think is a huge moment, because I think it's the moment where the decline was sort of cemented, that we weren't going to turn it around, things weren't going to change, and they were going to continue to fall. I'm hoping that the most defining moment of this decade is the appointment of Arteta. I'm praying that that this appointment is what turns it around, is the risk that needed to be taken to change things, as Daniel Roberts says there in the chat. Final one, quite a tough one, I know, and I'm afraid you have to go first, son. It is, if you could change realistically just one thing that happened this decade, what would it be?
Oh Jesus, that is a tough one, isn't
it?
So prevent one thing that happened this decade. The 100% ownership of KSE. I would have to say that I'm not going to give a massive explanation. Everybody knows. I think everybody feels the same thing. That's the sort of unanimous feeling throughout the fan base, and I think that tells you all. When someone has complete ownership of the club, it's a dictatorship rather than a democracy. I don't know. I just with Arteta coming in, my fear now with the Cronkies is that we're going to miss the boat on Arteta. As I says, but after 2 games, I think he's tactically very good. You can see that already, and I just think that if we mistreat him with a sort of underwhelming transfer budget, if he doesn't get the backing he needs, look, we have quite harsh fan base when it comes to giving people time in the sport that they need, and I think that if results don't go the way, regardless of how good tactically he is, the fan base will turn, and it'll only be a matter of time before we see him leave. And I think that us doing that could really benefit the next club that he goes to, and does give him the backing that he needs. Because as I said, look, you don't get that reputation from such high praise from so many highly regarded managers and individuals within the football world. It just doesn't happen, So he's obviously, look, he's one for the future, and let's just hope it goes the right way for him.
Drew?
It's my turn to be boring. I mean, I would agree, but see, the thing for me is I wouldn't hate if, Kroenke was in ownership. Again, I agree. I think it's the full ownership that's the issue, because me, Tom, I'm coming from a standpoint where I'm all for how ownership takes place in Germany, where the fans have, the share allotment that they do. And I think there's a reason why you still get that passion from the fans is still there, because they have a genuine interest in the club. It's not just from a result standpoint. This club is an actual part of their life. First of all, for me, I would have preferred a different ownership structure moving forward for the club. And again, I think we all have the same fears with what Kroenke's coming in. And while there are a lot of things I don't agree with how the fans have comported themselves in certain areas, I also understand it. Just because I don't agree with the we care you do movement or whatever, I don't agree with it, but I understand where it's coming from. I understand the issues that it's bringing up. I understand why fans feel that passionately about trying to maintain the voice that they used to have, and that they're deathly afraid of that they're not going to have. And I understand those kind of things. So, I think for me, that would be roughly the same thing. And, I think we can all unanimously agree there as well. So,
it's a real tough one, because mine's very risky. I really like the Arteta appointment, and maybe for me the change would be of appointing Arteta instead of Unai Emery in that moment, just to try and change things. But you could arguably say that 18 extra months under Pep Guardiola has made Arteta a better coach. So there's that caveat to it. I think there's a mystical side to that. So that's possibly one. A lot of people have talked about the Kroenke thing for obvious reasons. A lot of people have also said possibly convincing Alexis Sanchez to stay, not do the switch with Mkhitaryan, because it's not like we gained or lost any money. We lost a player and gained a player that didn't really work out for us. So the devil's advocate for that would be that he was declining when he left, and that has shown at Manchester United, and now on loan at Inter Milan, the little amount of minutes that he's got. So there's so many sort of caveats and benefit of hindsight to look at. But probably for me that I would make a change of who followed Arsene Wenger. So that would probably be my one. But there's been plenty of really, really excellent suggestions in the chat box. I'm aware of the time, and so I'm going to round off the show there with our predictions for New Year's Day. So don't string these out, boys. I just want a score prediction, Drew, for Arsenal-Manchester United, please.
Just a score prediction?
Yes, you are allowed no chat.
Do you know how hard that is for me? Yes. I'm going to say 2-2. I think we'll actually squeak a draw. I think there's a point to be taken, so yeah.
2-2. Interesting. Owen.
3-1 Arsenal. Simple. Arteta's first win.
Oh, fair play. He's confident. I like it. In the chat box, Daniel Roberts says 8-2. Very funny. That could be a decade-defining moment. Danny says 3-1 to Manchester United. 3-1 lost to Manchester United, says Archie. Matt Hales also says 3-1 Manchester United. There's not a lot of positivity. Abdullah says 4-0. I'm hoping that's for us. I'm going to claim that it is. 2-1 Manchester United. 2-1 loss. 3-0 Bulgarian Gooner. I mean, I can't blame people. I can't blame people. And Man United are annoyingly picking up their form as well recently, so it's going to be a tough one. Really, really interesting. I hope that you have a fantastic New Year's Eve tomorrow, whatever you are doing, whether you celebrate it or not. I hope you have a fantastic day. Drew, thank you ever so much for coming on, fella.
Always happy to be here. Thanks, buddy.
Is it though? Because it doesn't sound like it.
Look, man, I'm only two cups of coffee in. All right, be quiet.
Owen, I mean, again, a decade-defining moment is getting debutants like yourself on the show. Another fantastic one, so I appreciate it, mate.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for having me.
No problem whatsoever. You can go find Drew on Twitter at FMLehrer. That means teacher in German, I discovered the other day. And you can find...
You could have just asked me.
I could have done. Okay. Drew, where can people find you on Twitter? And explain your Twitter handle.
No, you could just ask me privately in the WhatsApp DM as usual.
And you can find Owen on Twitter at OwenYoung2. I want to say it's 2. Yes,
yeah,
and it's EION, right?
Close enough.
EION.
There we go. Yeah.
It's the Northern Irish pronunciation. So it is. I mean, I used to work with someone called Aoife, and spelling her name right was a challenge. But thank you, Owen. I much appreciate you coming on. Please give the guys a follow on Twitter, and you can find us on Twitter as well, as it says down the bottom there, at the Gooner Talk TV. As I said before, please enjoy your New Year's Eve, and I hope that 2020 is a fantastic year for you and Arsenal, of course. I mean, it can't get much worse, can it? So fingers crossed. If you've enjoyed the show, please give it a like. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and turn those notifications on so you could be one of these wonderful people joining us in our live chat. We'll see you again after the Manchester United game for our Raw reaction show. Apologies that there wasn't one after Chelsea, but I was there. That's a fairly good excuse, I feel. But we'll see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.